Hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Random Ramblings. This is episode 2 of Arc Within an Arc, where I will be speaking about the relationship between two of my favorite Star Wars Expanded Universe characters, Jacen and Jaina Solo, the twin children of Han and Leia Solo, and the elder children of the Solo family, and of course, Jaina and Jacen being the elder sister and brother to Anakin Solo. Shout out to all you Expanded Universe fans out there, which I have to say I am one of. And the Expanded Universe also serves as a great alternative retelling to the heavily derided and divisive Disney sequel trilogy, but as the Expanded Universe continuity finished prior to Disney being the sole owners of Star Wars prior to the buyout of Lucasfilm, I consider the Expanded Universe continuity canon, not the Disney sequel trilogy. There, I said it, I'm not a sequels fan, I do not like what they did with the sequels, I despise Rey as a character, not because she is a female character. I love Ahsoka Tano, I love Princess Leia, I love Padme. All these are strong female characters, not because they're female, but because they're just strong characters. Okay, let's stop defining a character solely based on their gender. It is stupid, it is political correctness gone fucking insane. Excuse my language, I'm not normally very angry, and I apologize for my language. This will not be for children, obviously, this video, because, let's face it, the era in which Jaina and Jacen are in takes place among one of the darker periods in the Expanded Universe continuity. I'm referring, of course, to the New Jedi Order series, and, of course, the Yuuzhan Vong War conflict taking place between 25 and 29 ABY, after the Battle of Yavin, for those of you who may be confused about that acronym. Anyway, I digress. Jaina and Jacen are the twin children of Han and Leia, who got married soon after the Battle of Endor. There was a conflict with Grand Admiral Thrawn, who was a successor to Palpatine, or essentially he was the second in command to Palpatine. However, he was not present at the Battle of Endor. And so after Palpatine's death at the hands of a redeemed Anakin Skywalker, he takes control of the Imperial fleet. And here we are also introduced to Grand Admiral Pellaeon, a former general of the Grand Galactic Republic, and they, of course, appear in the highly acclaimed and revered Timothy Zahn's Grand Admiral Thrawn trilogy, which I highly recommend to be either read or listened to on Audible, narrated by Mark Thompson, who is a fantastic narrator. He does the Star Wars books justice. He also narrates the Legacy of the Force series, which I have listened to as well. Fantastic job. And to Daria fans out there, he also is the voice of Kevin Thompson, the stupid yet lovable football player. And yes, I assure you, I will be doing a Daria series eventually down the road. Fantastic series. Very underrated. Anyway, I'm rambling again. Oh, wait. How appropriate. So soon after this conflict, Thrawn is defeated. Luke, we should note, also falls for Mara Jade Skywalker, a former Emperor's hand, which is a fancy way of saying an assassin for Emperor Palpatine. She was essentially under Palpatine's control, and after he died, Palpatine, before his death, sent a force scream to Mara, ordering her to kill Luke Skywalker. So it was thanks to this compulsion that Mara couldn't get it out of her head that she had to destroy Luke. However, she is eventually able to overcome the dark side, and eventually she and Luke get married. Before Luke and Mara get married, however, Han and Leia, after all the rebels, now the New Republic, defeat the Empire, Luke and Mara are blessed with a niece and nephew in Jaina and Jacen, who is born 5 minutes after Jaina. And a couple of years later, Anakin Solo is born, who is named, of course, after the redeemed Anakin Skywalker. And it was one of Leia's way of coming to terms with the fact that her father may have once been Darth Vader, the ruthless Sith Lord, and right hand to the Emperor. However, he was once a good person and also died a good person. So it was Leia's way of forgiving Anakin for his sins and recognizing that there was good in him in the end, which is a nice touch, because we haven't seen the reconciliation yet in Disney canon between Anakin and those he has hurt, especially Ahsoka and Obi-Wan. And I will say, despite what I have said about the Disney sequel trilogy, I am a fan of The Mandalorian. I did like Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi series. I do like them. I am not a Disney hater. I merely dislike what they did with the sequels, because it was very disjointed, and the characters weren't really fleshed out, and we never got to see a reunion between Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, Harrison Ford, Han Solo, and Carrie Fisher, Princess Leia, which is what the original fans of the original trilogy and prequel fans wanted to see. Heck, I admit I didn't see Star Wars until I was 15 or 16 years old. I am 30 years old now. I saw the originals, saw the prequels. I'm a prequels fan, but you cannot see the Star Wars trilogy without loving and respecting the originals. As far as I'm concerned, episodes 4, 5, and 6. George Lucas is a legend. He is the master of Star Wars. He is the master of the Jedi Order. He is a legend. And what Disney have done spits in his legacy, spits in his face. As far as I'm concerned, Disney Star Wars have damaged the reputation of Star Wars, but not destroyed its legacy. To us die-hard fans, Star Wars will always live on. Shall always be George Lucas's vision. His dream becomes a reality, regardless of how whitewashing and political correctness Disney tries to shove down our throats with characters, of a certain race or a certain gender being shoved down our throats solely based on their race or gender, not based on character type or personality. And it's that kind of ultra-political correctness that is ridiculous, because we are all human, regardless of what our race is, what our gender is. We're all human, and we should not be defined by our differences, but united by the fact that we're all people. That's just my opinion. I'm not a racist. I'm not sexist. I think those who subscribe to those things really just need to look in the mirror. It's not cool to be racist or sexist, It takes a lot of energy to hate people, and not cool. There are a lot of better things you can do with your life. I am so sorry. This is really turning into a ramble. I digress. Jaina Jacen and Anakin were the targets of various kidnappings by zealots of the Empire during their early years. However, they were always rescued either by the timely intervention of Luke and Mara or Han and Chewbacca, who always managed to save the children in time. And the children, of course, were resourceful enough to often save themselves, or at least get themselves out of trouble long enough before their family could rescue them. Growing up, Jaina and Jacen were very much opposite, yet united as brother and sister. Jaina was more of an extrovert, being very mechanically inclined, loving machinery and tinkering with engines of starfighters, while Jacen, also rather extroverted, had a deep love and respect for animals, being able to communicate with them through the Force. So much so that when they both joined Luke Skywalker's Jedi Proxium on Yavin 4, as teenagers, being around 13, 14 years old, Jacen kept a menagerie of animals in his room and would care for them, and often capturing them by using the Force. However, he took care of his animals and loved them dearly. Jaina, being mechanically inclined, would also love to tinker with starfighters, and was once given a Z-95 headhunter by her father as a gift. Jacen once had to use his animal empathy to get a crystal snake away from their friend Raina Thal after it bit Raina, after he attempted to expose Jacen's menagerie as being nothing but trouble and constantly bullying the Solos thinking they were better than everyone else. He came from an elite family and was quite stuck up and arrogant as a child. However, he would later grow out of this habit and be a good friend to the Solo children, but his story is one for another day. However, the children's childhood and teenage years wouldn't be all smooth sailing, as they were once abducted by the Shadow Academy, a group of renegade Imperials who rejected a peace settlement fostered between the Empire and the New Republic to maintain a peaceful coexistence between the two nations, meaning the New Republic would now be the dominant galactic government, and attempted to convert the children, along with several other captured children, into Dark Jedi to serve the Empire and a supposedly resurrected Emperor Palpatine. However, the children were able to escape, and with the help of Luke Skywalker overseeing the children's training, build their lightsabers. It was around this time that Jacen became attracted to another young student at the academy. Her name was Tenokar Jo, a warrior Dathomirian witch who was secretly a princess of the planet Hapes, although she preferred to be identified more with her Dathomirian warrior heritage. She spoke with a very upper-class accent, but was, unlike Reyna, was not arrogant, instead quite humble, and preferred to use her physical attributes instead of relying solely on the Force. Jacen and Tenokar were in sparring practice soon after constructing their lightsabers. However, there was a horrible accident, as Tenokar, who had hastily constructed her lightsaber blade, got her arm severed by Jacen, who was devastated by the accident and wanted to apologise to her. However, he is reassured by Jaina that it was an accident, and Jacen is a good friend and a caring Jedi who would never hurt anyone intentionally. Tenokar forgave Jacen, of course, for the accident, and the two of them would eventually grow closer romantically in the years to come. Among Jaina's crushes at this time was a street orphan named Zek, who was street smart, growing up on the streets of Coruscant, the underlevels, who was also Force sensitive and was once briefly tempted by the Shadow Academy and briefly fell to the dark side. However, once the Shadow Academy were defeated, Zek was redeemed after warning the others not to enter the Jedi Proxium, as there was a bomb in there. The temple. The bomb did go off, injuring several people and knocking Zek unconscious. However, he would later redeem himself, come back to the light, and assist his friends in thwarting other galactic threats. Among the other threats to the galaxy around this time, prior to the Yuuzhan Vong War, were the Emperor Storehouse Plague, where a mad Imperial scientist where members of a radical alien first group known as the Diversity Alliance attempted to release this plague upon the galaxy, which would target and kill off all humans. Battling Black Sun, the crime syndicate, during which time Jacen briefly became infatuated with Alja Giuliano, a spice-addicted, feisty woman who bore a grudge against Han Solo for supposedly killing her father while hunting treasure. However, it is later revealed that Han didn't kill her father. Her father died in an accident, and with the Solo's help, Angelia was able to overcome her spice addiction after being used by Black Sun for their own ends, and she later went to work for Lando Calrissian. Eventually, at the end of their adventures, the children were all crowned young Jedi Knights, which would prove quite fitting, seeing as the New Republic and indeed the galaxy would once again need the Jedi's help. So it would come to pass as the Yuuzhan Vong, an extragalactic alien species, would invade the galaxy in 25 ABY and set about destroying planets one by one. Among the first casualties in this conflict would be the death of Chewbacca, who, after saving several refugees on the planet Serpidol, Chewbacca would die a hero's death. However, he would die tragically, also after Yuuzhan Vong using a gravitational device used to inhibit planets and moons would use this technique to pull a moon literally onto the planet and destroy it, also crushing Chewbacca in the first place. Side note here, it sounds stupid when people say a moon fell on Chewbacca, but if you actually talk about the context in which this is actually used, it is not stupid at all. It is actually quite devastating. And the fact that Michael A. Salvatore, the person who wrote this, got death threats for killing off Chewbacca is just ludicrous and disgusting. He was just doing his job. Another casualty in this war came after the Yuuzhan Vong were able to engineer extragalactic alien creatures called Voxen using the DNA from Yellow-Siri, creatures that were able to create force bubbles around them, and Yellow-Siri trees, which would be used to prevent the Yellow-Siri from moving. This splicing of DNA would allow Voxen to sense other Force users, specifically Jedi. Everything came to a head during a mission to wipe out the Voxen Queen, as was determined that the Queen was the genetic template for all Voxen, as the Queen did not reproduce. So many young Jedi Knights, including the Solo children and Anakin, volunteered for this mission. Around this time, Jaina and Jacen's relationship was very strong. However, Jaina had suffered greatly serving in the elite rogue squadron as a pilot. At first, she was very enthusiastic about her role, until the loss of her wingmate, Annie Capstan, devastated her, as she was close with Annie and considered her a friend, being bunkmates. However, their relationship had not progressed further along enough for Jaina to develop a true friendship with her, much to her devastation. However, she was comforted by Jacen soon afterwards, who reassured her that no one truly dies. Not if you keep a place for them in your heart, then they shall always live forever. Jacen, meanwhile, had taken on a more philosophical edge as he grew older, losing the playful jokester side of himself and taking on a more serious philosophical note. Once, after a devastating battle in which half the Yuuzhan Vong's fleet were wiped out using a massive gravitational weapon called Centerpoint Station, armed by Anakin Solo, much to the dismay of Jacen, who only wanted the weapon to be used in a defensive measure, while reconciled Solo, the Solo's cousin, more specifically Han Solo's cousin, urged Anakin to use the device as a weapon. This was a pivotal point for Jacen, as he had been questioning not only the Jedi's role in the war, but in fact what it meant to be a Jedi, even considering at one point leaving the Order entirely, as he did not consider himself a Jedi, preferring instead to use the Force as a source of internal peace and harmony, rather than an external tool and weapon, as Anakin had a tendency to view the Force as, using it as a tool for justice to help those in need. Anakin was in many ways the polar opposite of Jacen, who was very proactive and preemptive in his actions, wanting to always protect those, and often putting his own life and inadvertently endangering those around him in the process due to his reckless yet passionate nature, much like his grandfather, Anakin Skywalker, before him. However, Anakin refuses to use the weapon in an offensive sense, much to Jacen's relief. However, Thraken uses the weapon instead, resulting in the prior catastrophe just mentioned. This causes Jacen to withdraw from the Force entirely, and he ends up working with his mother to help refugees on the desolate planet Duro, where he also works with his father. His mother, at this point, is managing Cellcore, the select Senate Committee for Refugees. During this time, during a battle against the Yuuzhan War, Jaina is injured in a terrible accident and is blinded temporarily, resulting in her being forced to take medical leave from Rogue Squadron and ending up on the planet Duro. All these events, by the way, take place before the mission to Micah, and this is key to understanding Jaina and Jacen's relationship. During this time, Jacen resolves not to use the Force at all, believing it is too dangerous a weapon. Disillusioned by the attack on Hapes and the Hapian fleet had suffered at the hands of the Yuuzhan War, and the fact that Centerpoint Station was used in such a manner, regardless of whether Anakin had used it or not, it was armed by him, leaving Anakin to contemplate what it meant to use the Force and questioning whether he would have actually been able to use it defensively had he been able to take the shot instead of his cousin Thraken, creating a wedge between the two brothers. However, Jaina listened to Jacen's concerns, and while she did not agree with him cutting himself off from the Force, she understood where he was coming from and supported him nonetheless. Also, Jacen would go out of his way to assist Jaina while she was blind, assisting her in a healing trance, breaking his sabbatical on not using the Force in the process. It should be noted during this time that Jaina's resentment against her mother comes out to the surface. The fact that Leia was never there for them during their formative years growing up. Concerns and frustrations she presents to Mara, who hypocritically and ironically tells Jaina that she is acting like a child and that Leia has done a great job as a parent. Ironic considering how protective, overly so, Mara would become when she became a mother herself. And instead of having Jaina's concerns validated or even acknowledged, the situation is rather swept under the carpet, which is ridiculous. Because if you really break it down, the Solos and indeed Skywalkers are in fact better parents than the Solos. But that's another story. During this time, the Yuuzhan invade Duro. The Duro Shipping Company, having collaborated with the Yuuzhan's so-called Peace Brigade, a collaborative traitorous movement made up of New Republic citizens who believed that the Yuuzhan would stop attacking other planets as long as Jedi were handed over. This is the formation of that movement. Jacen, upon negotiations with the head shipping director, discovers this corruption within Duro Shipping and informs his mother, who confronts one of the agents supposedly in charge of Duro Shipping, revealed to be the traitorous Norman Noor, a Yuuzhan spy who has been feeding information to the Yuuzhan for years and is in fact responsible for infecting Mara Jade with a comb spore disease, a disease responsible for wiping out many citizens and nearly bringing her to the point of death had it not been for the assistance of the Force. This complicates matters when it is revealed that Mara is pregnant and not only has to now fight for her survival, but for the survival of her child, who is yet unborn and unnamed. Around this time, the War Master Tasfong Lei, the War Master of the Yuuzhan warrior caste, and a high-ranking Yuuzhan comes to Duro personally, intending to sacrifice Leia. However, she is saved by the intervention of her son, Jacen, who battles the War Master in personal combat, observed by Leia and Jaina, who had come to save her mother as well. During the fight, Jacen hears a voice telling him to stand firm. Using the Force as a tornado, he lifts objects around the room and is able to knock the War Master out of a window, injuring him to the point where Tas Vonglar's foot is severed in the process. This enrages the War Master to the point of declaring the extermination of all Jedi, thus foreshadowing the Peace Brigade's existence. demanding specifically that they hand over Jacen solo. This puts Jacen at the forefront of the Yuuzhan Vong's attempts to capture the Jedi, and brings Jacen into a much more character-driven role, as his character had been shuffled into the background and overshadowed by Anakin at this point. Anakin, of course, being much more action-oriented and Jacen being much more philosophical-oriented. It should be noted, to those who have read the New Jedi Order, in the early books, Jacen is very indecisive and very philosophical. But this arc actually changes through Balance Point and is especially expanded upon in my favorite book in the entire series, Traitor, which does a fantastic job in really getting into the head of Jacen as a character and what it means to in fact be a Jedi or use the Force in general and what the Force actually is. But that's another story. For my part, I loved the early books and Jacen's arc from being indecisive to becoming more certain of himself, and the fact that he had a different view on the Force, being more philosophical and, pacifistic in nature than his brother. And while it could get a bit grating at times, Jacen's pacifism, that is, not philosophical way of thinking, because that's very interesting, being the mainstream viewpoint of what the Force is supposedly supposed to be used for. Being how there was Luke's way of doing things, which was very conservative and very defensive-based, often bordering on inaction, whereas there was Kip Darren and his group of Jedi, which were more action-focused and very aggressive, preemptively, fighting the Yuuzhan Vong, which may lead to the dark side, if one were to be so conservative in their viewpoint. Anakin, Jaina, and Jacen were all on Luke's side of doing things. Anakin, however, would occasionally borderline be on Kip's side, if we were talking philosophically, but he would always come back to Luke's way of thinking. But the Yuuzhan Vong War would open up many philosophical questions for the Jedi as a whole, on what it meant to be defensively focused versus preemptively active, and which was the better of the two, and what it meant to fight without succumbing to the dark side, even if it meant defending the galaxy from a far greater evil. Was it okay to use the dark side defensively in such a way? Or was there even such a thing as the dark side of the Force? Or was that just a lie perpetuated by the Jedi and Sith? Around this time, the relationship between Jaina and Jacen was very strong, the two trusting each other and confiding in each other their problems and issues, and always managing to work things out. Jacen being the little more introverted and thoughtful of the two, while Jaina being very headstrong and blunt, but still loving and compassionate. Such is the Solo way. Jaina, in many respects, being far more like Han in personality, and Jacen perhaps being far more like Leia in personality and nature. However, the mission to Mocha would change their lives forever. The mission, though successful in Jacen being able to destroy the Voxan Queen, would result in the deaths of many Jedi on the strike team. Luke Skywalker would not accompany the team, as it was deemed too dangerous, him being too much of a high-profile Jedi to be handed over to the enemy. So it would instead fall to Luke approving the mission, however not participating in the mission. Gana Rysode, an associate of the Solos, although not strictly speaking a friend, would serve as decoy leader, while Anakin Solo would serve as the true leader. Lando and his wife Tedra, yes, Lando Calrissian, the same guy who cracked onto Leia in The Empire Strikes Back, and was a first-class sleazebag, but one that we all love anyway, and seem to tolerate, which, if you watch Empire Strikes Back, would probably not age well now, but that's a story for another day. Yes, he got married to Tedra Calrissian. He has a wife. He's not a player anymore. Good for him. Agrees to pretend to hand the Jedi over in exchange for sparing the refugees of the Tasfaglu system, a system that was besieged by the Yuuzhan Vong and that they were using hostages as collateral. However, thanks to a previous engagement orchestrated by Luke and the New Republic military, the refugees are able to be saved. Over half the strike team members would end up dead, among them Anakin Solo, who used his last act to hold off the Voxen, giving the team a chance to escape, achieving a moment of oneness with the Force in the process, and dying a hero, just like his grandfather, Anakin Skywalker, before him. Jacen would kill the Voxen Queen, but then be captured by the mysterious avian creature known as Verger, a mysterious Yuuzhan Vong collaborator who had not only once attempted, along with her high priest, Master Eileen, to assassinate Luke Skywalker, but also and enigmatically provide the tears that served as the antidote to the comb spores to Nomenor's disease, thus saving the child of Mara and Luke Skywalker, who by this point in the story is named Ben, in honor of Ben Kenobi, also better known as Obi-Wan Kenobi, the master of Anakin Skywalker and Luke Skywalker after him. Jacen was captured and tortured in the embrace of pain for over a year at the hands of the invaders. During his torture in the early stages, Jacen could feel his sister suffering through the Force, through their twin bond, which is a bond that all twins have. Among them, Luke and Leia have this bond as well. Jaina was, of course, slipping to the dark side of the Force as a result of Anakin's death, and the capture of her brother at the hands of the Yuuzhan Vong warriors didn't help. However, she could not rescue him, as the shuttle they had stolen was being pursued by another warcraft, leaving her with absolutely no choice but to escape with the remnants of the strike team, among them Zek and Tenelkar Joe, who were both deeply saddened by not only Anakin's death, but Jacen's loss as well, supposed death too. However, Jacen, with Verger's assistance, would escape capture by the Yuuzhan Vong War, armed with a new philosophy and understanding of the Force. As a result of his torture, Jacen would come to view the Force as not split merely into light and dark sides, but being one. He also came to view the galaxy, and the way of responding to it is with love, unconditional and all-encompassing, as it is the only way to meet the universe that is irrational and in pain. With this new philosophy, to which Jacen and Verger impart to Luke, the Jedi's philosophy of the Force changes somewhat to that of what is called the unifying Force, in which there is no dark or light side of the Force exactly, but that the Force is all one, and it is merely the actions brought about by people who are angry or hateful, and those that have malicious or evil intent and darkness in their hearts would be considered dark side users, and the Force itself does not condone or care how it is used, as the Force is everything, and everything is the Force, even the Yuuzhan Vong. Jaina, for her part, is able to overcome her temporary fall to the dark side and find balance and come back to the light, with the help and assistance of an unlikely source being Kip Durran, who had once destroyed a planet under the influence of the evil Sith Lord Exar Kun. With his help, Jaina becomes his unofficial apprentice and potential love interest. However, their relationship does not progress beyond a professional one. Jaina is overjoyed when Jacen is returned to the New Republic, and Jacen and Jaina accompany a massive strike team to the planet Epoch 9, used as a bait to trap Tuss Vong Lei, who believes that they are protecting the new Chief of State of the New Republic, Karl Omas. Being that Tuss Vong Lei is a fanatic of the Yuuzhan Vong who hates the Jedi, he falls for the trap and goes to the hidden Imperial core world to try and kill the Jedi and the new Chief of State of the New Republic, soon to be later named Galactic Alliance. During this time, Jaina and Tuss Vong Lei battle in single combat, on the planet, while Jacen, who is up in the Royal Roost command ship, realizes his sister is in danger and goes to save her. Verger, who had returned to the New Republic and had defected to their side, tries to stop Jacen. During their conversation, Verger advises Jacen not to save Jaina, believing that there is no point. Jacen refuses and attempts to save her anyway. He gets trapped in one of the tunnels in Epoch 9 and is surrounded by Yuuzhan Vong and resorts to using a stunning force lightning to protect himself, overwhelmed with despair at the thought of failing his sister. However, Tas Vong Lee is killed by Jaina in personal combat, and both brother and sister are saved, with the assistance of Verger, who crashes an A-Wing starfighter down an airshaft, wiping out all the Yuuzhan Vong, except Tas Vong Lee, before his death at the hands of Jaina, resulting in many Yuuzhan Vong dying of suffocation. Her Force Spirit appears to Jacen soon after, stating that she made her choice because nature would always choose the young to survive, and she has no regrets in saving Jacen's life. By this point, brother and sister had been up and down. Both had fallen to the dark side, yet managed to find redemption, and they were still close. Close enough that when Jacen killed the true supreme overlord of the Yuuzhan Vong Onomai, who had captured Jaina, Jacen, prior to battling Onomai, went to save her. Jaina would also lend Jacen strength through the battle, although Jacen would deny her this, stating that she needed her strength to save herself. During this point in the battle, Jacen would experience a moment of oneness with the Force. And again, hearing that voice, revealed to be that of Anakin Skywalker telling him to stand firm, which was the same voice he heard during his confrontation with Tas Vong Lee. Afterwards, Jacen tells Jaina that he is going off on a 5-year journey to experience more about the Force, being how the Jedi have adopted the unifying Force philosophy, being that there is no light or dark side to the Force, merely the malicious and evil intentions and actions of those who use it. Therefore, it is acceptable to use Force powers not traditionally accepted by the old Jedi Order or Sith Orders. During his 5-year journey, Jacen experiences, major spoilers for the Legacy and the Fate of the Jedi series ahead, a terrifying vision of an apocalyptic galaxy being ruled by a man sitting on a dark throne, surrounded by acolytes. One of these people sitting beside the man, Jacen recognizes, and is determined to prevent this future from happening. He sees this in a place called Beyond Shadows, a place where the body is separated from the mind by use of the Force, and people can experience visions of the possible futures by gazing into something called the Pool of Knowledge. Ultimate power could also be gained by bathing in the pool. However, Jacen refused to do this, believing that it would be insane to attempt to know all, as no mortal being could know everything there is to know in the universe. He also declined to drink from an ancient relic called the Font of Power, a fountain that would grant those who drank from it ultimate power. Sensing its corruption by being tainted by the dark side, Jacen refused this too. As contradictory as it may seem, there is in fact a dark side, or at least a stopping point in the unifying Force philosophy, where Force users do accept there is in fact a dark side, but it is more to do with themselves. So still technically they do abide by a certain light and dark philosophy in the Force, even if it is just by themselves, being that dark or light is within them personally, not the Force itself. But still, that is worth mentioning. Around this time, Jaina and Jacen are reunited in 35 BBY. The Yuuzhan Vong War had been over for for 6 years, and the two of them happily reunite. However, their relationship would become forever altered in a conflict called the Dark Nest Crisis, where several Jedi would fall under the influence of a hive mind brought on by the Killik insect colony, who were being controlled by Raina Thal, who had become Unothal, as he had survived the crash of the shuttle Tresquan Flyer, excuse me for mispronouncing that name, during the mission to Micah, after being captured by two Dark Jedi, Welk and Lomi Plo, who had also been freed by the Jedi during the Micah strike team, but then had abandoned the others upon realizing that their intention was not to escape, but destroy the Voxen Queen. Dark Jedi, being primarily only selfish, as always, had decided to abandon the others and attempt to escape with their own lives. However, all three had been severely burned in the crash. However, Raina had managed to save both Lomi and Welk. All three had been corrupted by the joining hive mind. However, Raina Thal, taking on the persona of Unu Thal, the head of the Killik, one of the many Killik qualities, while Lomi Plo, being afraid of Anakin and only wanting to hide her existence, would become the Unseen Queen, a subconscious controller of all the Killiks, along with her Knight Herald right hand in Welk. This long and very complicated war would lead to a border dispute between the Killiks and Chess, Ascendancy Defense Force, whom the Killiks were encroaching on their territory. During this time, the Galactic Alliance and the Jedi Order's relationship would also come under strain, the Chiss believing that the Jedi some of them were partially joined, and in fact joining the Killiks, were actively aiding the Killiks and the Dark Nest in attacking the Chiss, while the Jedi, being firm supporters of the Galactic Alliance, would try to balance things out and serve the Galactic Alliance and the Chiss in battling the Killiks, who were the real problem. During this time, Jaina and Jacen's relationship would take a turn when Jacen, prompted by a vision of an eternal war brought on by the Killiks and Chiss, although he does not see the perpetrator of the war, tricks Jaina and several other friends, fellow Jedi, Lubaka, Tenel Ka, and Tahiri Velia among them, into attacking a Chiss supply depot under the pretext that the Chiss are going to use a bomb to destroy the Killiks. However, it is a trap, and this deception was merely used to provoke the Chiss in trying to exterminate the Killiks, Jacen believing, however extreme this may be, that with the Killiks dead, the Darkness would be destroyed as well, and the Chiss victorious. Thus, no other being would have their mind forcibly joined to that of the Killiks, and although the Killiks were primarily an innocent species, the Darkness were an insidious force that had to be stopped. Jaina, hurt and betrayed by this, and perhaps not helped by the fact that she was a partial joiner at this point, states that she would never fly with her brother again. Their relationship would remain strained for the next several years, even leading up to the Second Galactic Civil War, while the two of them seemingly were able to patch things up, or at least speak on civil terms. It should be noted that the Killiks were not exterminated, as Jacen had initially hoped, although the threat was ended after Luke Skywalker was able to kill Lomi Plo in combat and redeem Raina Thal, who was taken back to the Jedi Temple for evaluation, and to have his mind unjoined by the Killiks. During the Second Galactic Civil War, where Corellia desired independence from the Galactic Alliance, while insisting at the same time to be treated to the benefits of being a Galactic Alliance member state, was secretly building an assault fleet headed by Thraken Sal Solo. This initial separatist movement was opposed by both the Galactic Alliance and the Jedi Order. Secretly manipulated with the Sith Lady Lumaya in the shadows, several key events would lead to several deaths of innocent people, among them Prime Minister Adal Saxon, and Gilad Peliam's double during a peace conference on the Taraz station in the Taraz system. During this time, to root out the culprits, Jaina and Jacen, under the direction of Luke Skywalker, are given separate assignments. Jacen is to take Luke Skywalker's squadron hardpoint and go to Corellia to oversee operations there, as two of Corellia's planets are under blockade, while Jaina is to investigate mysterious tassels that are left at the site of a shuttle pilot who has supposedly walked out of his own volition out of an airlock to his death. However, he was being influenced by a mysterious woman who coerced him into walking out of the airlock. The two of them have a conversation and agree to swap assignments. There, on the planet Lord, Jacen, along with his young cousin Ben Skywalker, who is also his Jedi apprentice, meet Nalani Din, a fellow Jedi assigned to the Lord system. There they discover Shera Bree, who is secretly Lumaya, Dark Lady of the Sith, a former apprentice to Darth Vader and sworn nemesis of Luke Skywalker. Upon a series of misadventures involving the deaths of several perpetrators in violent acts, during which Jacen demonstrates a more ruthless philosophy in sacrificing the lives of some in preventing the deaths of the many, lead to a confrontation at Lumaya's home. There she reveals, after separating Nalani and Ben from Jacen, that Jacen's destiny is to become a Sith Lord and save the galaxy through the power of being a benevolent and restrained Sith Lord. Jacen at first refuses, stating that Sith, no matter what their intentions, are ultimately evil, as the dark side, as the Jedi by this point have also gone back to a more traditional light and dark viewpoint of the Force following the conclusion of the Swarm War, as the Darkness Crisis developed into. Sith would ultimately be corrupted by the dark side, and that there is no quote-unquote good Sith. Lumaya, however, would counter this by stating that Verja, Jacen's teacher and mentor, had in fact been a Sith and had been secretly training him to become a Sith Lord during his capture at the hands of the Yuuzhan Vong War, at the Yuuzhan Vong Embrace of Pain torture device, actually served as his training. Jacen, starting to listen to Lumaya, although still not sure, probes the future for possible events, another habit he has gotten into lately by this point. In all the futures in which Lumaya is either arrested or killed, Jacen and Luke Skywalker would engage in a duel in which Jacen would kill his uncle. Devastated and horrified by this occurrence, Jacen agrees to spare Lumaya, stating to Nalani, who had arrested her by this point, with Lumaya's consent, it should be noted, that they should just let Lumaya go, and that Nalani, if she agrees not to tell Lumaya, had done nothing wrong. Jacen probes the future again and realizes that in all the futures in which Nalani lived would result in Lumaya dying and the ever-brewing war becoming much worse, resulting in Jacen in a heartbreaking moment, yet one that he deems unfortunately necessary, resulting in him killing Nalani, apologizing to her before killing her. Nalani, for her part, pleads with Jacen to reconsider his actions, not for her sake, but for his, asking him, "What do you call someone who kills without needing to? What do you call someone who joins sides with the side of evil just because of a well-reasoned argument?" With Nalani dead, Jacen wipes an unconscious Ben of his memories of this incident and agrees to at least consider Lumaya's options for him. After Jacen leaves, Lumaya sees a vision of a corrupted Jacen Solo, however looking much different, with golden glowing eyes and a beard and a malevolent tone. She tells the Spectre that the Spectre is just that, a combination of the true Jacen Solo and the dark side energies that inhabit the home. Lamaya's home, it should be noted, is called the home. She states that one day the phantom Darksider shall come into being, although not yet, and that it is not her that is the true villain of this story, but rather to reconcile Solo, as due to his own petty self-interest has been escalating the war, and that the Solo's anger would be directed at him, not her, for now, and that her intentions for the galaxy are just, believing that the Jedi, as good as they are, having seemingly given up on personal revenge for Luke Skywalker, are flawed and are therefore unable to maintain peace and order through the galaxy, thus necessitating the Sith as the rulers of it once more, although nowhere near as the ruthless and megalomaniacal Palpatine once had. With that, Lamaya states that she will one day be the master of the new Sith Lord of the galaxy, Jacen Solo. Around this time, the Galactic Alliance speeds up efforts to blockade Corellia and take more somewhat aggressive and, in some cases, from a certain point of view, extreme measures to stamp out dissent following a terrorist bombing that injures several outside the Senate building and kills many innocent people. This includes the formation of a secret police known as the Galactic Alliance Guard. Upon being refused the post by Mara Jade Skywalker, who does not completely oppose the creation of such a force, but is uncomfortable leading it as a Jedi, believing that a Jedi should stay out of politics, the post is offered to Jacen, who accepts the role. This is in contrast to what a much younger Jacen would have said had the position been offered to him then. He most likely would have denounced it as a galactic police, stating that Jedi should have no part in such things, and that they were acting more like soldiers instead of peacekeepers. The irony. Around this time, Jacen also takes temporary co-control of Rogue Squadron, along with his sister Jaina, who is understandably furious, being a colonel, and Jacen just being given the post, even though it should be noted that Jacen never asked to be a colonel. He was given that role by Karl Omas and Charles Niathal, the supreme commander of the military, and of Mon Calamari, who would later serve a very important role alongside Jacen Solo. This demonstrates another shift in Jaina and Jacen's relationship, as Jaina, at one point, is accosted by a civilian ship who attempts to fire on them, who is pursuing Jacen. Jaina saves Jacen by disabling the ship, and Jacen, uncharacteristically and much to the shock of those around him, Jacen and Zek are patrolling Corellia as part of the blockade. Jacen shoots down the ship, destroying it, justified within the rules of engagement perhaps, but not being justified at all as far as the conduct of a Jedi is concerned. Furious, Jaina denounces Jacen's actions. Jaina also, who had been asked by Jacen to fire on the ship, had refused, resulting in Jacen firing on the ship afterwards. As a result of Jaina disobeying orders from a military standpoint, Jacen court-martials her, breaking his heart in the process, as internally, afterwards, Jacen confesses to Lamaya that he is appalled at what he can do and hates himself for it. However, Lamaya tells him that there is nothing to be gained for him in a reward by being a Sith, that part of doing this is to sacrifice everything he knows as being Jacen Solo, stating that it is worth the sacrifice to save millions of lives, while all the while being despised by those closest to him, and the lives he saves totaling in the billions of those who would unknowingly be saved by a monster. The sacrifice of a Sith, this new Sith, Lamaya's Sith, if you will, was to be vilified by those he loves in order to save the lives of billions and trillions of beings who would remain ignorant of his sacrifice for them, but be safe in the process. Rather than be court-martialed, Jaina quits in protest from Rogue Squadron and resumes her duties as a Jedi, eventually joining the Lemara task force, headed by another one of her romantic interests and, spoiler alert, eventual husband, Jagged Fowl. The two of them had met during the Yuuzhan Vong War and fought in many battles together, their relationship being strained also, ironically, during the Dark Nest Crisis, when Jaina and several other Jedi had attempted to rescue Lubaka from Chiss custody, thus dishonouring Jag's reputation in the process, and being exiled from the Chiss ascendancy in the process, having his honour and word destroyed in the eyes of the Chiss as a result of Jaina's actions. However, the two of them, Jaina and Jag, are able to patch things up, much to Zek's chagrin, who over the years had grown quite fond of Jaina and also was a joiner during the Darkness Crisis trilogy series. The relationship between Jaina and Jacen would further hit a downward spiral when Jacen, who acting on flawed information and believing that his parents were responsible for an attempted coup against his secret lover Tenel Ka-Jo, would fire on his parents, believing that they had been responsible. However, Han and Leia had been set up by the Prime Minister of Corellia, who was truly responsible for the coup, Dar Gedjin. Thankfully, Han and Leia were able to survive. Jaina, too, who was on the ship, would evacuate with Ben, and Han and Leia would escape. Ben, meanwhile, had fallen under the influence of Jacen, condoning many of his actions, being very young, 14 at the time, who saw Jacen as a hero, but still had grown up a little bit by this point and was not blind completely to the person Jacen was becoming. Jacen, the once humorous boy who would love animals and communicate with them, who had such empathy for others, even a species hell-bent on destroying the galaxy, that he would desire not their destruction, but compassion and understanding for the Yuuzhan Vong. This boy would eventually grow into a man, ruthless enough and willing to sacrifice those closest to him, including his parents and sister, friend Zek, and cousin Ben. Later, in a very telling scene, Jacen contemplates his actions, as he had always done as a youngster and younger man, and comes to realize that he was mistaken in his actions, but had he known differently, perhaps he would have done something different, and that he had done everything he could at the time and was justified in doing what he did, or so he believed. Thus, this keeps Jacen in the realm of a very flawed hero, not outright villain, as he did not, in fact, intend to kill his parents in cold blood, as he had reasons for doing what he did, and was perhaps going overboard. This opinion was also shared by Tenel Ka-Jo, who in a sense could understand why Jacen was doing what he was doing, that he was being deliberately selfless to the extreme, even overlooking family ties and loyalty to those, instead of letting them affect his judgment in serving the state of the Galactic Alliance, whom he had enthusiastically and wholeheartedly supported against Corellia. Following the death of Mara Jade Skywalker in a duel with Jacen, brought on by Lemaya, who urged Jacen to make a sacrifice and, quote, immortalize his love in order to become a true Sith, something had to be sacrificed. Mara, upon learning from Ben, who had overheard a conversation between Jacen and Lemaya, had discovered that he was a Sith and working with Lemaya, feeling betrayed and hurt, and following the assassination of Dar Gedjin, ordered by Jacen and carried out by Ben Skywalker, had resulted in Ben doubting his cousin's motives and questioning him even further, breaking his heart in the process upon learning that his cousin was truly a Sith and working with someone who tried to kill his father, Luke Skywalker, and terrorized his family for ages, and was nothing short of a monster. Upon being told the news that Jacen was a Sith and pleading with his mother not to tell his father, whom Ben at this point slightly feared, being that Luke was at this point the Grand Master of the Jedi Order, not just Ben's father, Mara agrees not to tell Luke or the Jedi Council of this news. Instead, she tries to kill Lumaya by ambushing her. However, this was anticipated and set up by Jacen. However, with the intervention of the Sith meditation sphere, also known as SHIP, interfering on Lumaya's behalf, as it believes that apprentices, as it views both Mara and Lumaya, should not kill each other, merely fight. Lumaya eventually follows Jacen to the planet Karvan, who is pursued in turn by Mara, near the Hape system, where Jacen swings by to see Tenel Ka and his secret daughter Alana, whom she does not know of her parentage to Jacen, but merely views him as an uncle or a good friend to Tenel Ka. Believing that Jacen was intending to sacrifice either Tenel Ka or his daughter, a secret that Jacen had tried very hard to keep from everyone, including Lumaya, for their protection, brings Lumaya to the point of tears. Upon realizing that Lumaya knows of Jacen's relationship to Tenel Ka and Alana, Jacen fires on the Sith meditation sphere with all 8 of his proton torpedoes in his StealthX ship, resulting in the ship falling down, crashing, stating that Lumaya brought this on herself by teaching him to be so ruthless. Lumaya, for her part, it should be noted, takes it on the chin and does not resent Jacen for this action, having once in fact been set up by Jacen to fight both Mara and Luke Skywalker in a duel to the death, which would have resulted either in Luke dying, thus leaving Jacen open to possibly take over the Jedi Order, or the death of Lumaya, which may have been a last-ditch effort, although never stated attempt for Jacen to kill Lumaya and not take up the role as a Sith Lord. But that is never stated, and merely open to interpretation and my overactive imagination. Following this brutal duel between Mara and Jacen, Jacen is able to kill Mara after using an illusion of Ben to deceive Mara. He kills her with a poison dart in the leg. While Mara dies, Jacen apologizes for having to kill her, but states that it was necessary in order for him to save the galaxy, and that she is responsible for saving so many lives, among them Ben and Alana. Mara, for her part, refutes him, stating that he is just as vile as Palpatine. To this, Jacen insists that it is not about ambition or greed, but about peace, wanting to save the galaxy and building a different galaxy to the one that they had both grown up in, and pleads with her to understand what he had to do, and urging her to believe him. For her part, Mara dies defiant, stating her certainty and belief in Luke that Luke would crush him for her Ben, becoming one with the Force, and eventually fading in completely at her funeral upon Jacen entering the funeral parlor as a message to Luke, not to reconcile as he initially believes, but to state that Jacen was her killer. Prior to this, Jacen changes completely upon adopting the Sith name Darth Caedus. The persona of Darth Caedus and that of Jacen Solo are quite distinct, where Jacen was empathetic, had a sense of humor, although later would grow up to be a little far more ruthless than his younger self, was still a very compassionate man, and would only do things out of necessity in order to protect those he loved. This is noted in several instances prior to him fighting and killing Mara, during conversations with him and Lemire, where he states it is not his wish to deceive Ben or manipulate him into becoming his possible Sith apprentice. He does not enjoy manipulating him. He wants to protect everyone, including his cousin and friends and family, from harm, and he is fine taking on the mantle of Sith for himself, but does not want others to be placed in danger or needlessly hurt or sacrificed. This demonstrates a level of compassion and commitment that is still at the core of Jacen Solo, demonstrating that despite his actions, ruthless as they may appear, at the core of them, Jacen is still a tremendously compassionate and caring individual who truly, honestly only wants what is best for those he loves most and the galaxy, and is determined not to make the same mistakes as his grandfather, Anakin Skywalker, as Jacen believes that Anakin's actions in saving Padme, or attempting to save her, were driven by an obsessive, selfish love, whereas he is driven by a much more noble goal in saving the entire galaxy from a great evil. Thus, he is falling to the dark side willingly and intentionally for selfless reasons. Upon Jacen's identity as Mara Jade's killer being discovered, and a confession obtained by a trusted ally of the Jedi Order, Lon Shivu, a very underrated character, but a very pivotal one, a lieutenant in the Galactic Alliance Guard, following a coup between Jacen Solo and Char Niathal, resulting in Jacen, prior to the death of Mara, becoming co-chief of state of the Galactic Alliance, partnering with Lon Shivu, who essentially becomes Jacen's second in command. While he does not approve of Jacen's actions in killing Mara, he pretends to understand. Lon Shivu is a good man who fights for the Galactic Alliance but hates Jacen and his methods, and takes Ben in a kind of mentorship role in replacing Jacen. In confessing this, Jacen is ousted as the main villain of the series to his family, and Jaina, upon receiving training from Boba Fett, resolves to fight her brother herself, not to kill him out of revenge or anger or hatred, but because she is the only one being able to do so, being the sword of the Jedi. Thus, she was named by Luke Skywalker soon after Jacen was returned to her during the Yuuzhan Vong War. All the Jedi Knights, specifically the Micro Strike team, were knighted in a special ceremony soon after the Galactic Alliance was formed in 28 ABY. Thus, technically, the Jedi Knights, Jaina and Jacen, were knighted twice, although this was a more public ceremony headed by Kol Omas, the new Chief of State of the Galactic Alliance. During Jacen's knighting, he was told by Luke to never stop asking questions. And during Jaina's knighting, unbeknownst and prompted possibly by the Force itself, Luke named Jaina the Sword of the Jedi, being like tempered steel, a firebrand to her enemies, a shield to her friends, dispensing justice wherever she went. Struggling with this philosophy of understanding what it meant to be a Sword of the Jedi, Jaina would work tirelessly, first in attempting to hunt down and kill Alima Ra, often burning herself out physically in the process, but with the help of Jagged Fowl is able to realize that a sword not rested is a sword unfit to be wielded. Thus she is able to maintain some mental and emotional balance within herself. Following two attempts on the first attempt on Cadus's life, whom Jaina calls her brother and refers to him internally, not by Jacen, because by this point Jaina considers Jacen dead, believing that deluding herself into thinking that Jacen had died in the Yuuzhan Vong War, justifying it that the person who came back was different, and that her true brother died in the embrace of pain. This attitude is also unfortunately taken and fostered by Jacen's parents, Han and Leia, who believe that Jacen died after killing Unamai, dying of his injuries in the process. This rejection of Jacen and failure to redeem him is a quite tragic turn in the Legacy of the Force series, and one that is quite sad, being that no one tries to redeem him or save Jacen, with the exception of Luke Skywalker, who, to his credit, not knowing at the time that Jacen killed Mara, while knowing that he is still a Sith Lord, attempts to reason with him and redeem him on several occasions, all rebuffed by Caedus, who, it should be noted, once states that he is not Luke's father and doesn't need to be redeemed, a statement which Caedus initially instantly regrets saying, as he did not mean to insult Luke or the memory of his grandfather, whom he still holds in high regard. And it should also be noted that Caedus, for his part, still loves everyone in the galaxy, even his family, and accepts the costs of becoming a Sith, as much as it pains him, and accepts the fact that those who he once loved now hate him, but can see no other way of turning back, other than doing what he is doing. Thus he accepts their sacrifices and rejection of him as merely par for the course in his duty as a Sith. During Jaina's fight with Caedus, whom, upon being unknowingly protected by Luke via a force illusion, force projection, making Caedus believe he is fighting Luke Skywalker, Jaina severs Caedus's arm and hears Jacen's voice in her head screaming. Using a nice sister blood trail, Caedus is able to use Jaina's blood to track Jaina back to a secret Jedi base on Shurik Mead. The Jedi are aware of this and set a trap for Caedus. Caedus, aware of the trap, welcomes it, who by this point the Galactic Alliance had aligned with the Imperial Remnant against Corellia, who had formed into the Confederation, whom in turn the Confederation and other rebel factions had formed an uneasy alliance with the Jedi, who had split from the Galactic Alliance upon the death of Cal Omas, orchestrated by Caedus. However, Omas, unknown to everyone except Ben, had committed suicide intentionally by Omas, trying to help Ben get back on Caedus's good side earlier in the series. The Jedi, of course, were still no friends of the Confederation, believing that they had started the war in the first place, and remained committed to serving the Galactic Alliance. However, they refused to serve a Galactic Alliance headed by Jacen Solo. Jaina and Jacen's final confrontation, spoilers ahead for Invincible, the final book, and most heartbreaking and beautiful of the Legacy of the Force series, and such a fitting end to their Jacen and Jaina's character arc. Jacen goes to dispose of the corpse of Isolde, Tenelkar's father, who had been unwittingly and unknowingly to Caedus used as a template by the Moff Council, who, against Sidious's orders, had been used as a nano-killer template test subject targeting Tenelkar's family, which would also include Caedus's daughter. It should be noted that at this point, Caedus had narrowly survived an attack by Luke Skywalker, and resulting in the bridge of the Anakin Solo nearly being completely destroyed. Caedus had then received a vision from the Force of his daughter Alana, sitting on a white throne surrounded by friends in a time of peace. Thus Caedus believed that in surviving Luke's attack, he had indeed won the war. He would achieve the galactic peace that he had sacrificed everything for, and his daughter, his little girl, would be safe. It should be noted that at one point, Caedus had even kidnapped Alana, terrifying her until she realized the truth, and Caedus had confessed his feelings to her, stating that he was her father and he loved her. This brought out the humanity that seemingly had been lost to Caedus, and indicates to the reader that some of Jacen was still there in essence, and that Jacen would never harm Alana, and that when he was with her, he was not a Jedi or a Sith. He was just her father, and she was his little girl. Fortunately for Alana and Tenelkar, who pleaded with Luke for help, she was rescued by Jacen's mother, Leia, and Han, whom in a heartbreaking moment for Caedus, sneak aboard Caedus's flagship, named the Anakin Solo, ironically, and rescued. Caedus, upon hearing sensing the trap, runs to Alana's defense after a duel with Sabatine, Luke Skywalker, and Ben Skywalker, which ends in a draw and used to distract Cadus. Devastating him that he is not being able to reunite with his daughter drives Cadus nearly to the point of insanity, resulting in him murdering a fellow and loyal officer, Lieutenant to boot. This further damages his reputation with the military up until that point, which had been very good, resulting in another schism and degree of separation between Cadus and Jacen Solo. Jacen Solo, the military leader who would be able to get everyone laughing in the room laughing at once, who still retained, however brief, a sense of humor and kingship with his men, just like Anakin Skywalker did during the Clone Wars, and just like Vader did during the time of the Empire. This caused fear, resentment, and hatred against Cadus to foster. Back at the disposal pit, Cadus disposes of the body in the disposal chamber, but realizes too late that the Moffs, disobeying his direct orders, had taken Osolda's blood. Osolda had been killed by Cadus upon being released from prison. It had been Cadus's intention to free Osolda and take him back to his ship, the Beam Racer. Because Osolda's blood had already been taken by the Moffs, however, Osolda, for his part, believed Cadus was tricking him and using him deliberately as bait to infect his daughter and the rest of his family, thus defying Cadus and leading Cadus, it should be noted, to regretfully kill him by snapping his neck. Upon discovering the betrayal by the Moffs, Cadus calls his chief aide all up and orders and requests that had any ships been left the Anakin Solo's hangar, to which Olap confirms. Cadus, realizing that there are Imperial men in the ship carrying the dangerous nano-killer to the Hoppian Dragon Queen, Cadus attempts to go hunt down the ship and stop it himself. However, he is met at the door by a stab in the chest from a lightsaber by none other than his sister Jaina. Surprised, Cadus is momentarily stopped, stunned for words, but then shocks his sister with Force lightning. It should be noted that the two engage in a vicious duel. Jaina, while fighting Cadus, cannot be helped but in awe of him, seeing as he is now fighting with one arm, a hole the size of a thumb inside his stomach where she stabbed him with her lightsaber, yet he is still able to stand and fight. At one point, the two fall over the conveyor belt, and this causes a break in the fighting. At this point, Cadus deactivates his lightsaber and clips it to his belt, stating to his sister, "Jaina, listen to me. You need to get out of my way. I'm trying to save Talakar and Alana." Jaina replies, "Sure you are, just like you saved Isolde." Cadus replies, "Isolde would have made the same choice. In fact, he did." "Jaina, we don't have time for this." Jaina's response, "So die already." Cadus had told Jaina that he was trying to save Talakar and Alana, to which Jaina didn't believe him. The two keep fighting. At one point, Cadus tries to throw Jaina into the still lit incinerator. Jaina, using the Force, is able to propel her away from the flames, but still slams her into the burning steel of the incinerator. She uses the Force of her emotions, specifically the positive memories of her and Jacen together when they were much younger and before conflict had ripped them apart, to give her strength. Using the love she has for her once heroic brother, she continues to fight, slamming the door in Cadus's face when he tries to leave once again. The two keep fighting. Jaina is able to disable Cadus's foot and prepares to kill him with a strike that Cadus cannot block However, she is still left open to a counterstrike should Cadis choose to do so. Instead, Jaina hears Jacen screaming to Tenelka to take Alana away, warning them of danger. He drops his lightsaber and lets it fall to the floor. Unfortunately, Jacen cannot finish his sentence as Jaina's lightsaber stabs him in the heart, killing him. This act, however, would convince Jaina that in his final moments, Jacen Solo's aspect had overtaken that of Darth Cadis, thus indicating that there was still some good in Jacen after all, and that the dark side had not completely corrupted him, and that his redemption is still possible, and that just like Anakin Skywalker, Jacen Solo found redemption and was able to come back to the light, which is what I personally believe. This is further identified in Fate of the Jedi when the spirit of Jacen Solo, not Darth Cadis, it should be noted, but Jacen Solo, states to Luke and Ben, who had been exiled by Nalana Delia, who had taken over the Galactic Alliance at this point, as punishment for Jacen turning into Darth Cadis in the first place, resulting in Luke taking the blame. Jacen says that all the anger and hate that Cadis had felt, Jacen did not bring with him at the time of his death, also stating that he forgives Jaina for killing him. He is happy when Ben finally forgives Jacen for his sins against him, killing his mother and manipulating him into becoming a Sith, and warns them not to continue on in their search for a mysterious woman later identified to be Amberloth, stating cryptically and sarcastically that if they wish to find her, they have all the time in the world, which, of course, being beyond shadows means they have no time at all, as they are separated from their bodies and must return to the realm of the living as soon as possible. It should also be noted that no other being was able to warn them about Abeloth, and no other being was able to warn them or convince them to leave beyond shadows, except Jacen. He also appears after Luke and Darth Krayt battle Abeloth, stating that Luke was letting Abeloth win, that letting the Dark Man win. The two had teamed up in an attempt to destroy Abeloth. Abeloth had inadvertently and unintentionally been released by Jacen when he gazed into the pool of knowledge, a fact that Luke imparts to Jacen, much to his initial scorn, but also, it should be noted, Jacen does feel guilt for this act, and softens. He also admits to Luke that it wasn't only the Dark Man that prompted him to turn to the dark side in the first place, but the person he saw standing beside the Dark Man, indicating that not only would the Dark Man rule the galaxy in a future where Jacen not interfered and saved the galaxy, but that this person would also serve the Dark Man, that person being his daughter Alana. For his part, Luke is unable at this point to forgive Jacen. However, he does understand why Jacen did what he did, and wishes that Jacen had told him what he had seen in his vision, stating that the two of them could have worked things out together, to which Jacen says he couldn't have, seeing as it was something very personal. A statement which you cannot help but sympathize with, talking about the vision specifically, not Jacen turning to the dark side, because this was before that happened. As for Jaina and Jacen's relationship, in the aftermath of Jacen's death, Jaina is of course devastated, believing that she'd killed Jacen before he was able to warn Tenelka and Alana of their impending danger. However, thanks to Jacen's warning, Tenelka is able to save Alana from the Nano Killer, and the Solos adopt Alana as a war orphan named Amelia. In the end, Jaina does understand why Jacen turned to the dark side and believes that he succeeded in what he set out to do, sacrificing everything to save the galaxy, his name, his reputation, even his life to do so, and forcing her to examine what it truly means to be the Sword of the Jedi. Unfortunately, because of the acquisition of Disney buying out Star Wars, the expanded universe ends before we could see a final and possible reconciliation between brother and sister. Although Jacen's redemption is heavily implied, and the reconciliation with him and those he was closest to is as good as it's going to get, being that we saw him talking with Ben and Luke, ends Jacen's story and character arc in a very nice way, although denying us what many of us, and me as well, being a fan of the two of them, would have loved to see, a reconciliation or at least conversation between Jaina and Jacen. However, the fact that she is able to understand where Jacen was coming from and still love Jacen means that I think, given time, perhaps, had they been able to see each other again, Jacen in turn would have forgiven Jacen for his mistakes, realizing that he was her brother, and no matter what, they were family. For his part, I do believe that Jacen did find redemption in the Force in the end. But to do so, he had to sacrifice his life to do so, just like his grandfather, Anakin Skywalker, before him. And that he knew what he was doing. But in the end, Jacen, not Caedus, saved the galaxy and his family. Had he still been Darth Caedus, he would have been willing and able to sacrifice his daughter to save the many. But to do so would have made him a monster, just as bad, or if not worse than Palpatine ever was. So that is the story of the very convoluted, complicated, ultimately brilliant and beautiful story of the relationship between Jacen and Jaina Solo. I hope you enjoyed this rather long video, and please forgive me for my rant at the beginning. I just get very passionate about Star Wars, and I don't like the Disneyfication of Star Wars and the sequel trilogy, being how politically driven it has become, and politically correct indeed how society has become in itself. As I've said before, I don't believe a character should be a character solely inserted into a series merely because of their race or gender. What makes a character great is their personality, their traits, whether they are selfless, selfish, have good reasons for doing bad things, or do good things for selfish reasons. We love a character based on their personality, just as we should love people based on how we are treated by people. It is not based merely on looks or how attractive we think someone is sexually. And that is another problem I have with Twilight, a major problem in fact. And yes, I should you people, my viewers, be watching and willing, I shall review the film Twilight or the book series. And yes, I have the book series purely for research purposes, I assure you. I'll be happy to review that series. But again, that's a story for another day. I hope you enjoyed this very long version of Arc Within an Arc, and I hope you enjoyed it. Should you be wanting me to review other character relationships, please let me know down in the comments. Like this video, hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed the content. I apologize for making this video very long, but it was essential, being that Jaina and Jacen are two extremely important expanded universe characters, and doing a 20-minute video would not have done either them justice or the story they tell, because you cannot have one without the other. Until next time, I'm your host Daniel with Random Ramblings. This has been Arc Within an Arc. Be cool, stay safe, and I will see you guys next time.